Many know about slavery, but few discuss paper genocide. We did not all come from Africa, and most of us have Aboriginal roots that were stripped away due to reclassification and miseducation. As a Native Black American and a member of the Muscogee Creek Nation, I understand the importance of tracing your lineage. If you want to learn how to trace your genealogy and apply for tribal citizenship, send an email to mike@keymediapro.com to schedule a consultation.
They don't want you to remember this. You not no slave, you indigenous. Fuck how they painted them Indians. You went to war with the French and the British men. Quite frankly, you was kings, Merovingians. They took the women and men, made them prisoners, raised up the children to worship their images, set up a lab to the genes and they mixed them. And this shit get way deeper than your pigment. What?
You don't have to try to be something you're not.
Trying to be something I'm not? Trying to be proud of my African heritage? That's being something I'm not, then fine.
My grandmother was a full-blooded Iroquois.
I know all of that, Mama.
They don't know this. I am alive because of the blood of a people who never scraped or begged or apologized for what they were. They asked only one thing of this world, to be allowed to be. It broke my heart when you changed your name. I gave you my grandmother's name, a woman who bore 9 children and educated them all, who held off 6 white men with a shotgun when they tried to drag one of her sons off to jail for not knowing his place. And you had to reach into an African dictionary to find a name that would make you proud.
My father was raised in the era when black niggas couldn't claim Native American. Making music would've thought I had help, but the Indians I know wanna be the chief they self.
All right. Let's get some fists and feathers in the chat if you can hear me loud, crisp, and clear, and we'll go ahead and get this party started. Hit the like button on the way in, subscribe to the channel if you're new, and hit the Cash App or the PayPal if you support the mission. Today, we're going to be taking another look at a YouTuber that I've really been highlighting on my platform lately. His YouTube channel is called UBTV, and he's created some very, very great indie films on Aboriginal history over the last few years. Most of you guys most likely are not familiar with him, so let's go ahead and catch you up to speed.
For so long, and for this day I prayed, that the stars would help me guide my way home. Lost in the land of our ancestors, who knew it was the dirt beneath our feet. That's not where they tried to tell us. For years in school, we were gone off McGraw-Hill textbooks. No truth, no shame. And at the point that I realized the truth had been disguised, that I'm not African, I despise that lie. Who am I? For generations, my people stayed gone off idols made of stick and stone, the rape babies of Rome, the divided slaves of Egypt, subservient to the united fake Jews and the wild Gentiles from the cave, a confused jigaboo slave from Timbuktu to New Babylon. For centuries, the truth stayed hidden. History got rewritten on scrolls in vermilion. and manipulated Mississippians from Corinthians to Philippians.
And if you guys enjoy the Aboriginal content, make sure to subscribe to my new channel, Native Black American Journals. You guys can find exclusive content about Black Indian heritage over there.
People have been waiting a lifetime for something like this. Now, this is just a tiny bit of information now.
But they take it as huge.
Right, because it's cracking open the door that was closed for centuries.
There's a place in Africa you could say that I'm from, a tribe. I am thrilled. It puts a name, a place, a location, a people. It opens up such possibilities.
But the problem is, Sierra Leone wasn't the only answer Vi got. A company called Relative Genetics found a match to a single person in the Wobi tribe in the Ivory Coast.
Different? Different. Now, I got all excited about that, and this is different. Now, how could that happen?
Then a third company, Trace Genetics. Your particular sequence matches sequences reported among multiple Mendanka individuals in Senegal.
What's up with this?
And Family Tree DNA, the company that linked Vi with Marion in the first place, came up with a whole list of matches. This goes on and on.
My goodness.
So what do we know about Vi's ancestry? The DNA does indicate that she has distant relatives in the Mende tribe, but she also has relatives in all those other.
Now, do you guys see why I offer the genealogy services that I do? Because for far too long, they've been playing in our faces with these fraudulent ass DNA testing kits that tell you you're 5% this, 10% this. The fine print says it's entertainment purposes only. Oh, and wait, they're selling your DNA to Big Pharma. But you guys are signing up by the droves to take some test that you think is going to get you in touch with your Aboriginal roots, when in actuality, the only way you can go on that journey is through paper trail research.
For sure where Vi's maternal ancestor actually came from. When I handed Vi the certificate, she got extremely emotional about it. She wept, and it meant so very much.
People want to believe.
They want to believe they've gotten an answer.
And it's not fair of us to let them believe that we're giving them certain answers, because scientifically, we just can't.
Hank Greeley is concerned that the science isn't really there yet for you to be giving them the name of a tribe.
I think for most companies, I would be concerned too.
But what about your own company?
We have
He
the
didn't
largest,
exclude you. He included you.
but we have the largest set of sequences from Africa. And so with that, we're able to provide some level of probability in terms of frequency.
But he would say that even though you have the largest database, it's still small on the scope of things.
As I said, I share those concerns.
About yourself.
Our DNA.
And that's the rub. This business of genetic genealogy is fraught with limitations. For one thing, it can only provide information about a tiny fraction of our ancestry. Because we get half our DNA from our mothers and half from our fathers, almost all of our DNA gets shuffled and remixed every generation, making it impossible to trace what comes from whom. There are just 2 bits of DNA that remain pure: the Y chromosome, which passes directly from father to son, and something called mitochondrial DNA, which
Come on, guys, they've been playing in our faces for far too long. I'm a card-carrying member of the Muscogee Creek Nation. We have federal recognition. I have full tribal citizenship, and I can tell you, no tribes in America, nor any other place on earth, accept DNA testing kits as proof of heritage, as proof of lineage. And it just so happens that the folks who are trying to sell us this fake science God damn it, they're making a bag. That black dude, I believe his name is Kittles, Rick Kittles or something. He's some kind of doctor or something. Yeah, he's selling $700 DNA testing kits so that you can know what African tribes you might maybe be related to. I mean, this is sick, guys. This is extremely sickening. This is big business, and I do not want to see us fall victim to these schemes any longer. Come on.
Passes unchanged from mother to child. Hank Greeley, a law professor at Stanford University, has studied this new field. He worries that people don't realize just how many ancestors they actually have.
8 generations ago, both you and I had 256 great-great-great-great-great-great-grandparents.
Wait, you're saying that if you go back 8 generations, we have 256 great-great-great-grandparents?
Yes, it doubles every generation. So you've got 2 parents, you have 4 grandparents, you have 8 great-grandparents, 16 great-great-grandparents, and it adds.
Yes, Stogie, how perceptive. How perceptive. They are playing in our motherfucking faces. Look at this. He wants us to pay $700 for a test kit, a t-shirt, and a certificate, guys. We're going to drop $700 for a t-shirt and a certificate and to spit in a cup. Meanwhile, for $75, you can consult with me for an hour and learn how to trace your genealogy, link tribal affiliation with your ancestors, and apply for tribal citizenship.
Clinton. Hi, I'm just giving you a quick announcement and a quick rendition of my consultation meeting with Mike. He was a great person to work with. He's a great genealogy specialist. Kind of mostly confirmed a lot of things that I was doing. And, you know, I still need some help. And it's okay to go for somebody with some help that know a little bit more than you. And I'm glad that I was able to come across this guy's information. The ancestors are in the algorithm. And I want people to understand that his information is legit. His information is the best source. And he can also do tracing for you and give you a whole runaround from the ancestral past. I just want to say thank you to Mike, thank you God, and thank you ancestors.
It adds up fast. It adds up so fast, in fact, that if you go back 20 generations, you've got over 1 million grandparents.
1,048,576 to be exact. And in each generation, DNA testing can provide information about only 2 of them.
So you could be Peruvian on your mother's side, Japanese on your father's side, Swedish on everything else.
And you'll never know.
And you'll never know the Swedish from the Y chromosome or the mitochondrial DNA.
Now, you've looked at several of these companies that are doing these tests.
Yes.
Do you think that they explain what you just explained to us?
No, I don't think any of them does as good a job of pointing out the limitations. But, you know, businesses often don't go around telling you how weak their product is.
We don't oversell. I mean, we just say, look, we provide a service. If you're interested in exploring a tiny bit of your DNA and trace its ancestry.
Tiny bit of your DNA, what? If you're interested in tracing a tiny bit of your DNA, huh? Okay, guys. Entertainment purposes only. I told you. If you're interested in tracing a tiny bit of your DNA, then go pay $700 and they'll tell you some random names of some tribes. Come on, y'all. This is ridiculous.
You know, businesses often don't go around telling you how weak their product is.
We don't oversell. I mean, we just say, look, we provide a service. If you're interested in exploring a tiny bit of your DNA and trace its ancestry, we can do that.
When you say it's a tiny little amount,
It's less than 0.1%.
and that's pretty teeny.
Yeah, but for people who know nothing about any of them, I think it's very important.
When you say it's a tiny little amount,
It's less than 0.1%.
and that's pretty teeny.
Yeah, but for people who know nothing about any of them, I think it's very important.
The recent attention being pushed toward ancestry companies is far more than just a ploy to extract priceless DNA for medical research. It's also a method of pushing the false historical narrative among Black Americans that their ancestors were not here before the first Europeans. This process is manufactured, propped through marketing specifically to people based upon the supposed scientific credibility of the DNA extraction process. The term DNA has become a trigger word, meaning accurate or foolproof, as it's seen to the public. But how accurate could a DNA test possibly be, considering we have 256 grandparents in 8 generations, and only 2 can be highlighted through a DNA test? DNA should never be confused with ancestry. Without doubt, this is an extremely vague result for a process that most people think is foolproof. Surely there's a better way. And in fact, there is. Public birth records.
That's right. During the consultation, I show you guys how to use birth records, death records, marriage certificates, U.S. Census cards, draft cards, you name it. We have a meticulous paper trail here in the United States. The first U.S. Census was created in 1790, so oftentimes we're able to trace our lineal ancestors back to the late 1700s. And when we talk about DNA testing kit, or really DNA testing kit scams and frauds, we really have to mention Henrietta Lacks, because I'm not sure if you guys have heard of Henrietta Lacks. I'm not sure if you're privy to her story, but I urge you to do some Googling, research her on your own time. Henrietta Lacks was an African-American woman, quote unquote, African-American woman. You know how they have to relabel and misclassify us, right? But she was a Black lady whose cells were taken without her knowledge in 1951 during treatment for cervical cancer at Johns Hopkins Hospital. These cells are now known as HeLa cells, HeLa cells. They became the first amorphous human cell line, meaning that they can actually divide indefinitely in a lab setting. So her cells were kind of immortal, right? This property made them invaluable for medical research, contributing to advancements in vaccines, cancer treatment, and more. And peep game, guys, they took her cells without her consent. They profited off of genetic research on her DNA, and she didn't even know what was going on. So imagine what we're doing when we voluntarily give our DNA samples to these pharmaceutical companies that are selling them and doing who knows what with the information. Truth is way stranger than fiction, y'all. I'm telling y'all. Truth is way stranger than fiction.
Most accurate process of tracing one's genealogy. How far can you trace your lineage? If your ancestors were slaves, did they even keep records? Of course they did.
Did you read those results? 20% European. You are 1/5 white. Wow. Oh, man. I'm horrible in sports, so maybe this explains that. My jump shot is horrible. 19% European. Are you surprised to know that you have that much European ancestry? I guess so. As dark complected as I am. It means you're a third white. Well, that's surprising.
Surprising.
Surprising. You are 33% European. I'm 50-50. To my horror, the chairman of African American Studies at Harvard at the time was a half a white man. Surprising. 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 Surprising.
Look, these are real. Here is a prime example of how disgustingly low the world will go to hide who you truly are. They hire their porch monkey propaganda puppets at institutions like Harvard and make them dean of the Department of African American Studies. In 100 years, academia will support the idea that blacks are descended from Europeans and Native Americans no longer exist. But why isn't Native American DNA showing up in test results? Go to Google right now and check out the hundreds upon thousands of complaints from people claiming that they have Native American ancestry. But the results came back and they were sitting there with the Don Cheadle face. All these Native American grandparents, well, according to Ancestry.com and MyHeritage and 23andMe and a slew of other DNA charlatans, your grandparents lied to you and everybody about who they were and about who you are.
You know, Mike is the real deal. His information is real. You know, he's a humble brother, and he's all about the information. He's not about, you know, personal gain or personal applause, you know, personal credit. This is about our nation. It's not about one individual, but it's about us collectively as a people. And Mike is all about that, you know. So we stand behind the brother 100%.
If you have any doubt, get it out your head immediately. So yeah, like I'm going to continue to work with Mike as much as I can. So I want to say thank you, Mike, for actually taking the time out and talk with me and my husband. Like you definitely informed us on a lot of things. And the people out there that's watching, he will also inform you on a lot of things that you may not even know about. So I want to say thank you again, Mike.
According to them, your grandparents are liars. And their DNA test proves that. So what's the real reason Native American ancestry doesn't show up on any DNA tests? Just as with anything else, money, power, control. Fact, Native American tribes are discouraged from sharing their DNA with any research company, and nearly all tribes have declined participation in such studies. Imagine millions more people claiming indigenous heritage, and think about the amount of money, land, and resources the federal government would have to commit to those people on their behalf. But at its root, the true reason for this DNA propaganda is to push the false historical narrative of all Black Americans being from Africa for the purposes of countering our will to claim what is rightfully ours. One thing that you will often hear is that Native Americans aren't Black, they're red with straight hair. When someone makes a statement like this, inevitably it's just because they've been totally brainwashed with a fraudulent historical perspective. Yes, long before Europeans touched the Americas, the Mongoloid Asian people crossed the Bering Strait through Alaska and started to settle here in the Americas centuries prior. But it wasn't like no one was here. The indigenous people of the Americas were and have always been Black.
I want to tell people they can use Africa as an example. Compare a North African to a South African. They look like different people, different phenotype, different complexion, right? Compare an East African to a West African, they look like they can be from different planets. Well, it's the same thing when you look at different ethnic groups of American Indians. Yes, there are those Southwestern Plains natives that look like this, and they migrated from across the Bering Strait from Mongolia, Russia, Siberia, but they are not the original American Indians. We are. The Spaniards called us negritos, negros de terras, mestizos, mulats, mulattoes, you name it. But either way, it's very well documented all the Black aboriginals that they came in contact with. All you got to do is know where to look.
Image that has been promoted is that of a Euro-Mongoloid hybrid and is in no way a factual representation of a true Aboriginal American. However, for centuries, both of these populations coexisted. But how did this come to be? Surely, if Native Americans were black, there would be some sort of evidence. And since most people have never seen a black Indian, they just assume they never existed. Let's dig through the pages of history to identify the deception of our past.
For the last realm of the means of six. And also
Hernando de Soto was one of the first colonial explorers to travel into the interior of the Americas. Christopher Columbus never explored deeply into intercontinental lands, only in the Caribbean, the coast of Central America, and a few areas on the coast of South America. De Soto was far more influential in westward expansion and the treachery of the conquistador. Here's a quote from the narratives of the career of Hernando de Soto. The expeditions of De Soto and Coronado were the most elaborate efforts made by the Spaniards to explore the interior of North America, and in some respects, they have never been surpassed in the later history of the country. Between them, they nearly spanned the continent from Georgia to the Gulf of California. Of the two, that of De Soto excited the most interest at the time, and this distinction it still retains. It was the first extensive exploration of at least 6 of our southern states, and their written history opens with the narratives which tell its story. These same narratives contain the earliest descriptions which we possess of the life and manners of the Southern Indians so famous in literature and history. The Choctaws, the Cherokees, the Creeks, and the Seminoles. These narratives also record the discovery of the Mississippi River and the story of the first voyage upon it by Europeans. As a young man, Hernando de Soto made his first voyage to the Americas before the age of 20. This was seen as quite the accomplishment. On his second trip, he teamed up with a unit of other Spaniards and ransacked Nicaragua. Later on that same voyage, De Soto was an instrumental player in overthrowing the Incan Empire.
Come on, those Spaniards especially did a number on Central and South America. You see the lasting effects of Spanish conquistador colonialism to this day. I mean, look at Haiti and the DR, one island totally segregated. You got a black side, you got a light-skinned Spaniard side. I mean, it's a very, very, very steeped in colorism, to say the least. Those South Americans are known to bleach their skin, favor whiteness and lighter people over darker people. I mean, take a look at the favelas, and it's all the dark-skinned South Americans living there, whereas the light skins live in the cities, living pretty well off.
After executing women, children, chiefs, princes, and kings, the Spanish overthrew Cusco, the capital of the Incan Empire. Having ransacked Peru for its riches, De Soto returned to Spain to present his spoils to the Spanish crown. he is well received and accepted into the Order of Santiago. De Soto was now officially a member of the Spanish crown under Queen Isabella and the House of Castile.
That was the motivation of these conquistadors. If they went and they slayed the indigenous people and they brought the riches back to Spain, they would be promoted into the aristocracy. They would be given land in Europe. They'd be given titles. They'd be given prestige. So what did they do to earn their family's prestige? They slayed all the black Indians.
Very same house that Christopher Columbus sailed under just years earlier. During this time in New World discovery, Rome was aggressively sending fleets to the New World. And under Papal Bull Dum Diversus 1452, the Pope decreed that all non-Christians will be subjugated to perpetual slavery. Then in 1493, Pope Alexander, Caesar Borgia's father, signed Inter Caetera, which extended that infinite slavery under God to all lands west and south of the Cape Verde Islands. The Pope also gave exclusive rights to the families of Portugal and Spain.
So for all of you guys that are diehard Christians and Catholics, maybe you want to think twice about that. You know, they had a whole papal bull, the Dum Diversus in 1452, which was the official letter from the Pope, where he said, hey, those Africans, those indigenous people in the Americas, enslave them all. The Lord said it's okay. Enslave them all. Take their profits, take their possessions, take their property. This was decreed by the church. It was backed by their faith. So modern day, when so many folks are Christians and Catholics, are they just those that have fallen for the programming? Because that Christian Catholic faith is what wrote off on genocide.
Ferdinand and the House of Aragon, and of course, Queen Isabella and the House of Castile. On his final trip, De Soto was given permission to colonize Spanish Florida and the southeastern United States.
Stogie says black conquistadors. Yes, black conquistadors. They had just barely kicked the Moorish Empire out of Spain before they started conquering the Americas. So yes, a lot of those Spanish conquistadors had African, North African Moorish guides and helpers and slaves. Some of them had some Moorish ancestry themselves. So, you know, again, truth is much, much stranger than fiction. And when we talk about the Africans and how they sell out their own people to the transatlantic slave trade and how they're so genocidal and warring maniac-like folks, well, if you think about it, if it wasn't for them North Africans snitching and telling the Europeans how to get to our land, we would have probably still been ruling it. We would probably still have everything the way that it should be. But those North Africans snitched and told the Europeans how to get to the promised land.
The southeastern part of the country had the highest concentration of indigenous Native Americans. That fact still holds true to this day. As the Spanish arrived, the natives let off smoke signals up and down the coast to warn of the Spanish fleet. When De Soto landed in Florida, he brought with him over 600 men, over 200 horses, and hundreds of pigs. A little known fact about the conquistadors: they brought attack dogs, mostly mastiffs and hounds, who were fed a steady diet of human flesh and trained to kill. Most villages were small with less than a dozen homes. DeSoto and his men would roll 300 deep up on these villages. DeSoto would read a statement to these natives as he arrived. You and all your lands now belong to the crown of Spain. Submit and accept Jesus as Lord, and you will be spared.
So again, all you Christians, I'm perpetually looking at you with bombastic side eye. Oh yes, you get bombastic side eye because do you know that they used Christianity, the whole story of Jesus of Nazareth? Did you know that that was used as a tool to commit genocide on our people? Literally, right after King James writes his, version of the New Testament, they come out with the papal bulls and they say, "Hey, anybody that's not a Christian around the world, we can enslave them, we can do whatever, we can rape them, we can murder them with impunity." So, for those of us modern day that are Christians, hey, let's put on our tinfoil hat and say Jesus is really real and he's the Son of God. Would he just sit idly by while these Spanish genocidal conquistadors use his words to commit acts of terror? I don't know.
And should you refuse, with the aid of God, we will enter your land against you with force. And we will make war with you in every place and by every means we can and are able. We will put you, your wives, and children into slavery. We will take your property, and we will do you all the harm and evil we can. And that's exactly what they did. DeSoto was well schooled in the sport of slaying Indians. DeSoto and the Spaniard savages pillaged from the coast of Tampa Bay through Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Memphis. A picture of DeSoto hangs in the White House, heralding him as a hero and as the man who discovered the Mississippi River. According to the official academic narrative, these people must have never existed. Until present day, thousands of mounds are still found all over the Mississippi Basin and the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains.
Come on, guys. DeSoto was one of the first Europeans to travel the Mississippi River, to go all through the South to the Midwest. And guess what? You know why there's such a dense population of Black folks in the South and the East Coast? Well, that's because it's our ancestral homeland. And over time, we were reclassified from Indian to African American. But hey, we've been in our ancestral homeland since day one. And it wasn't until the Trail of Tears pushed some of us to Oklahoma. And then after Oklahoma, some of us made our way out to California, that we start to spread around a bit. But for those of us that have ancestors from Georgia, the Carolinas, Louisiana, all those areas, well, DeSoto ran all up through our shit. DeSoto was wreaking havoc,
including the Cahokia Mounds in Cairo, Illinois, which at one point in time was a city bigger than London and Rome. Contrary to historical perspective, the Spaniards faced a tremendous adversary in the Indians from the southeast. An earlier Spanish expedition was subdued when the Indians from the southeast captured a ship and beheaded everyone on board, except for one man who would later become DeSoto's interpreter. Whenever DeSoto approached a new village, he ordered everyone to be killed. And for the people who didn't fight back, they were taken as slaves. And some were forced by the threat of torture and death to take arms against their own people.
So when the Europeans want to say, "Oh, well, you American Indians, you guys were warring with each other, and you guys weren't at peace," it's called divide and conquer. We were doing just fine until Europeans started coming over here and instigating armed conflicts, instigating and supplying weaponry and forcing people to fight other neighboring tribes. Yeah, they don't want to talk about that part, do they? And yeah, it said DeSoto is commemorated in the White House. Christopher says there's a city in Texas called DeSoto. As Larvadane says, we have a parish here called DeSoto Parish. Yes, DeSoto died in Louisiana. He died in Louisiana. So I think there's even some monuments out there in Louisiana. That's right.
In nearly every case, DeSoto and his men outnumbered the natives 3-1, sometimes as much as 10-1. His army numbered nearly 1,000 men, half of which were captive slaves being used as frontline ragdoll pawns during the battles that broke out between the Spanish Romans and the Indians. When a battle ensued, it was reported that many Indians from the fighting tribes were as young as 4 years old. And
come on, as young as 4 years old. Stogie says Catholics be doing the most atrocious things repping God. Yeah, facts. Most people haven't heard about this. There's not been much, if at all, media coverage on this. Put some fists and feathers in the chat if this is the first time you're hearing this. But just earlier this month, the Catholic Church in LA had to pay over $1 billion to victims that they have harmed over the years. You know, the Catholic preach touching little boys, sexual molestation stereotype that we always hear that's been turned into a joke. Yeah, the Catholic Church just paid over $1.5 billion. 1.5 billion. So how powerful is the Catholic Church if they can pay a $1.5 billion settlement? And guess what they said? They said it's coming out of their tithes and their church investments. It ain't even really hurting their pockets like that for them to just pay 1.5 billion to the folks that they have sexually abused throughout the years. This is crazy, y'all. This is crazy. The Catholic Church payouts for clergy abuse, clergy abuse, it topped 1.5 billion in a new record settlement. More than 300 priests who worked for the Archdiocese in Los Angeles have been accused of sexually abusing minors. These Spaniards, these Catholic folks, they've been doing this shit since the beginning of their existence. Sick bastards.
These children would even take their own life in lieu of being captured by a cruel Spaniard. Women and children fought bravely until they were eventually cut down and either retreated or taken as slaves. The Spaniards had steel, which the natives did not. They also had a fleet of mounted knights on horseback to come rescue any Spaniard who got in trouble. And let's not forget about the cannibal attack dogs. But of all this, these would not be the Europeans' most effective weapon. Their most effective weapon was disease. The colonizers brought smallpox and a myriad of other diseases, which eventually would kill almost half of the native population. It was no secret, just as in the voyages of Christopher Columbus, the Spaniards were extremely motivated to find gold. Whenever De Soto ransacked a village, he would aggressively interrogate any surviving captive as to the whereabouts of possible gold. Always will remain the countless stories of this Spaniard's savagery. His men killed hundreds of thousands of black natives from Florida to Georgia to North Carolina to Tennessee to Mississippi, all while enslaving any survivors. These men, not just in North America, but in South America before, responsible for the plague that wiped out half the population. On later expeditions, it was noted that the once thriving Mississippi Basin, lined with mounds, people, and civilization, had been decimated, and where there had been hundreds of villages, remained just a few. Every legitimate account of the Native Americans prior to 1700 depicted a dark to copper-skinned race of people who dominated the landscape. But after 1800, every single image of an indigenous American changed. But why is that? When we look at the Spanish depictions of the natives, much is left to the imagination, and it's beyond obvious that these portrayals were completely fabricated in order to characterize the natives as subhuman barbarians. The fake Jew news of Spain often showed the natives as bald, white savages. In 1524, over a decade before De Soto pillaged Florida, Italian explorer Gianni da Verrazzano said this: "The complexion of these people is black, not much different from that of the Ethiopians. Their hair is black and thick and not very long, tied behind the back of the head like a small tail. As for the physique of these men, they are well proportioned, of medium height, a little taller than we are. They have broad chests, strong arms, and the legs and other parts of the body are well composed. There is nothing else, except that they tend to be broad in the face, and they have big black eyes, and an attentive and open look. They have a sharp cunning, and are agile and swift runners."
Session. It was a lot of informal information that was given. I am very extensive when it comes to history, so I think that it was great information because I learned quite a few things that I didn't know personally. I learned more in detail on some things that I did know as well. So I think that is a great part of the session, as well as getting an understanding of where you should start to finish. It was very helpful as far as starting off with just getting that family tree mapped out, and then from there going and finding those families within those different documents and different data systems. So I think that this was very helpful when it comes to giving me further ideas on what it is that I should be looking for while creating my family tree and mapping out my genealogy. And I truly, honestly appreciate your time.
The notable work America by Aldonus Montimus and John Ogilvy is probably the most detailed account produced and illustrated that best describes the New World. Although through history some have argued that because the artist didn't travel to America himself and relied on intelligence, his work was just a fanciful exaggeration. This fact could possibly be true, but his descriptions of other parts of the world were never questioned as unauthentic. Furthermore, his illustrations directly parallel descriptions from hundreds of artists from Europe. Although we have more than enough visual evidence of knowing exactly who these Indians were, something is missing. Where is the rest of the art? During the time when thousands upon thousands of Europeans traveled to the New World, only a few pictorial accounts remain. This era was the supposed European Renaissance, where painting a picture of a bowl of fruit was considered fine art.
Hey, I don't feel so bad about all those photos I've taken of my food throughout the years, you know? When it comes to the European Renaissance, they thought that little painting of that bowl of fruit was fine art. So when we compare their culture to our culture, I mean, who's really the most cultured? We had to teach them how to bathe, remember that?
Yet, where one would expect to have tens of thousands of illustrations, we are left with just a few. These Indians completely scrubbed from history.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I will continue to share some videos from that content creator, UBTV. He still is active on YouTube. He just posts very, very sparingly now. You know, it might be a few months in between a video. But yeah, he's done great work when it comes to revealing the hoax behind DNA, as well as getting into some of the history between the Spaniards and the Aboriginals of the Americas. But this is all I've got for you today. Make sure to hit that like button if you've yet to do so. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. And if you've yet to trace your family's heritage, go ahead and book a genealogy consultation. See you next time. Peace.
They don't want you to remember this. You not no slave, you indigenous. Fuck how they painted them Indians. You went to war with the French and the British men. Quite frankly, you was kings Merovingians. They took the women and men, made them prisoners. Raised up the children to worship their images. Set up a lab to the genes and they mixed them. And this shit get way deeper than your pigment.